Pretend to be my husband, how? They'll kill me tonight. Stop right there. Just act like we're together. She's my wife. Leave her alone.
Pretend to be my husband, Mara Ellison whispered, her voice breaking against the cigar-scented darkness of the private lounge, or they'll kill me tonight. The man standing before the window did not move at first. He only turned his head slightly enough for the golden light from the city skyline to catch the brutal perfection of his profile. Dante Moretti was dressed in a masterfully tailored midnight blue suit, his broad shoulders still as carved stone. His dark eyes fixed on her like he had already counted every bruise she was trying to hide. Behind Mara, music poured from the ballroom in glittering waves, violins and champagne laughter, and rich people pretending they did not smell blood in the air. Her fingers clutched the little silver coin pendant at her throat. Midnight was 17 minutes away, and the men hunting her were already inside the building. Dante's gaze dropped to her wrist where red fingerprints had begun to rise against her skin. "Who put that look on your face?" he asked, his gravelly baritone so quiet it felt more dangerous than a shout. Mara almost laughed because the answer was too large for one name. Julian Vale had started it 2 years ago, with soft compliments that became small corrections, then jokes, then public shame. Celeste Harrington had sharpened it tonight with a smile sweet enough to poison tea. Sergei Volkov's men had finished it in the service corridor, when one of them murmured into a hidden earpiece, "Take the necklace first." After midnight, the curvy accountant disappears. Mara had not screamed. She had not dropped the tray of donor cards in her hands. She had simply walked away counting exits the way her father had taught her when she was 12. 1 hour earlier, she had stood beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Blackstone Hotel wearing a deep teal dress that skimmed her lush, generous curves like water over velvet. It was beautiful but safe, beautiful but quiet. A color chosen by a woman still trying to survive by not being noticed. Around her, Chicago's richest families drifted between marble columns and silent auction tables, bidding on paintings, diamonds, private island weekends, and the illusion of goodness. Mara was there as a forensic accountant hired to review the charity foundation Julian's family controlled. She had found shell companies buried under scholarship funds, donor money moved through 3 states, and one transfer routed through a name her father had once warned her never to say aloud. Moretti. She had told herself it was coincidence. Then she saw Dante across the room, and the air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian found her near the auction display, where she was pretending to study a framed oil painting, while actually watching the reflection of 2 armed men in the glass. "Mara," he said loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "I almost didn't recognize you. That dress is very ambitious." The laughter came softly at first, the kind rich people used when they wanted cruelty to sound like etiquette. Celeste slid beside him in silver silk thin as a knife and twice as polished. Her diamond bracelet flashed when she touched Julian's arm. "Don't be rude, darling. I think it's brave when a woman takes up that much space and still comes to events like this." Mara's face went cold. Not angry. Not yet. Just cold, as if something inside her had stepped backward from the pain. She had learned years ago that if she answered too quickly, they would call her dramatic. Julian lifted his champagne glass and looked her over with the casual ownership of a man who had once kissed her in private but refused to hold her hand in public. "You always had big dreams, didn't you? Big feelings, big expectations. But women like you should understand limits." The guests nearby went still in that hungry way crowds did when humiliation became entertainment. Celeste smiled wider. "Julian told me you once thought you might become Mrs. Vale. Isn't that adorable?" Mara felt the pendant at her throat press into her palm as she squeezed it. Her father's old coin, her only inheritance. For one mad second, she imagined throwing her champagne in Celeste's face. Instead, she lowered her eyes. Across the room, Dante Moretti watched from beside the balcony doors, silent and unreadable, his stare cutting through the laughter like a blade through silk. Mara left the ballroom before anyone could see her hands shaking. The service corridor behind the kitchens smelled of lemon polish, hot butter, and rainwater dragged in from the alley. She moved quickly, not running, because running made predators chase. Her father's voice came back to her from a childhood she had tried to bury. Memorize exits. Watch reflections. Count shoes, not faces. She passed one security camera, then another, noting the 2-second delay in their swivel. At the end of the hallway, 2 men in black suits stood near the freight elevator. One had a scar under his left ear. The other wore his gun too high under his jacket. Mara slowed behind a rack of linen bags just as the scarred man spoke into his collar. Volkov says no mess before midnight. Take the necklace first. Kill her after the toast. The world narrowed to one sound, her own heartbeat heavy and hard beneath the silver coin. Necklace. Not laptop. Not files. Not her phone. The necklace. Mara backed away step by careful step until her shoulder struck a metal shelf. A stack of plates trembled. One fell. It shattered across the tile with a sound like a gunshot. Both men turned. Mara ran then. Her soft round figure moving with a forced panic had no right to command. She did not run toward the lobby. Toe open. Not toward the elevators. Too slow. She took the narrow side hallway, the one she had noticed earlier because the carpet changed from red to black near the private rooms. Her lungs burned. Her dress caught at her knees. Behind her, a voice barked there. She pushed through the first unlocked door and stumbled into darkness, expensive smoke, and Dante Moretti. Now he stood between her and the door, not trapping her exactly, but making the world feel like it had rearranged itself around his will. You chose an interesting room to hide in, Dante murmured. Mara swallowed, tasting fear in champagne. I didn't know it was yours. His mouth barely moved, but something like amusement touched the corner of it. Everyone knows what is mine. That was when she understood. The guards outside, who had vanished the moment she entered. The way men in the ballroom lowered their voices when he passed. Dante Moretti was not just another rich donor. He was the head of the Moretti crime family, the man Julian's father pretended not to fear, the name buried in the foundation transfers, the monster respectable men used when banks and lawyers were not enough. Mara took one step back. I made a mistake. Dante's hand moved faster than her fear could follow. His large calloused fingers closed around her wrist, warm despite his coldness, firm enough to stop her, but careful not to hurt the bruise already there. No, he said, his voice a low lethal purr. You made the first intelligent decision of your evening. She stared at his hand, then at the door, then at the window, 30 floors above Michigan Avenue. You don't understand. They think I have something. Julian set me up. Volkov's men are here. If I leave with you, they'll think I told you everything. Dante leaned closer, and she caught the scent of cedarwood smoke and something metallic beneath his cologne. Then tell me everything before they guess correctly. The words came out broken at first, then faster. Mara told him about the charity ledgers, the missing donor money, the shell company's Julian's sudden engagement to Celeste, the forged access logs with her name on them, and the strange transfer labeled only with a string of numbers, her sullen engagement to Celeste. Father used to write in old notebooks. Dante listened without interrupting. That frightened her more than if he had shouted. Powerful men always interrupted. Julian interrupted. Board members interrupted. Police officers interrupted women who looked like Mara and assumed panic meant guilt. Dante only watched her with dark, predatory calm, absorbing every detail. When she touched the pendant, his eyes sharpened. Where did you get that? He asked. Mara's breath caught. My father gave it to me before he died. For the first time, Dante Moretti looked truly surprised. A hard knock struck the door. Mara flinched so violently Dante's grip tightened around her wrist. Not painful, protective. A man's voice came from outside, polished and familiar. Mara, are you in there? You've caused enough embarrassment tonight. Julian. Of course it was Julian. Shame rose in her throat, hot and bitter, because some wounded part of her still recognized his voice before it remembered his betrayal. Dante did not look away from her. Is that him? Mara nodded once. Outside. Julian lowered his tone. Come out before you make this worse. Celeste is worried people will think you're unstable again. Mara's lips parted. No sound came. Dante's jaw tightened sharp enough to cut. Then he released her wrist and offered his arm as if they were not standing inside a death sentence with violins playing beyond the wall. You are walking back in there with me. Mara stared at him. As what Dante opened the door before answering. Julian stood on the other side, his expression annoyed, until he saw who stood behind her. Color drained from his face so quickly it was almost beautiful. The corridor beyond him had filled with curious guests drawn by scandal the way flies found honey. Celeste hovered near the ballroom entrance, her silver dress glittering, her smile already faltering. Dante stepped into the light, and conversations died one by one. Mara felt the crowd notice her body differently now, not as a target, not as a joke, but as a woman standing in the shadow of a man they feared. Dante placed his hand at the small of her back, steady and possessive. "As my wife," he said softly. And before midnight could claim her, Mara Ellison walked back into the ballroom on the arm of the Mafia king. The ballroom did not become quiet all at once. It died in pieces. First, the laughter near the champagne tower vanished. Then the string quartet lost half a measure before recovering with trembling bows. Then the whispers around the auction tables thinned into nothing, as Dante Moretti walked in with Mara Ellison on his arm. His palm rested against her back, warm and steady through the teal fabric of her dress, and that single point of contact held her upright when her knees wanted to fold. Mara could feel every stare landing on her curves, her face, her bruised wrist, her silver pendant. But the old cruelty had changed shape. No one smirked now, no one dared. The crowd physically parted as Dante moved forward with the silent grace of an apex predator, and Mara realized with a strange, dizzy shock that the room was no longer asking why she belonged there. It was asking what would happen to anyone who claimed she did not. Julian recovered first, because arrogance was the last organ to die in men like him. "Dante," he said, forcing a laugh that came out thin and dry. Mara has always had a talent for dramatics. He reached for her, as if he still had the right to touch her elbow, and Dante's gaze dropped to Julian's hand. Nothing else happened. No threat. No raised voice. Just that look. Julian's fingers stopped in midair and curled back toward his own body. Mara felt the crowd see it. More than that, she felt Julian see them seeing it. His face tightened. Celeste drifted closer, her silver gown whispering over the marble, her smile trying to reassemble itself. "Mara, sweetheart, this is embarrassing. You shouldn't involve Mr. Moretti in whatever little episode you're having tonight." "Mrs. Moretti," Dante corrected. His voice was low enough that people leaned closer to hear it, which made the words cut deeper. Mara's breath caught. Julian blinked once. Celeste's painted mouth opened, then closed. Dante did not look at Mara to ask permission. He did not need the room to believe the lie, because he spoke like a man for whom reality was something others adjusted around. For tonight, he continued, his hand firm at her back. "You will address her with respect, or you will not address her at all." A ripple passed through the guests. Mara saw donors, lawyers, councilmen, and wives with diamond throats exchange quick, frightened glances. These were people who had ignored Julian's insult minutes ago because cruelty was cheap entertainment. Now they studied the floor, their champagne, the auction cards in their hands. The whispers that usually accompanied Mara were gone. Every last one. Julian's jaw worked as he tried to smile again. "Your wife," he repeated. "That's fascinating, because according to our firm's records, Mara is under internal review for data theft. I'd be careful standing too close to her. She has a habit of taking things that don't belong to her." The words struck exactly where he aimed them. For 2 years, Julian had trained Mara to fear that tone disappointed reasonable public. It made him sound like the responsible one, and her like the mess he was tired of cleaning up. Several guests stirred. Celeste seized the opening. "It's tragic, really. We tried to protect her reputation. Julian did everything he could after she became obsessed with him. But some women confuse kindness with commitment." Mara felt heat crawl up her neck. The old instinct rose. Explain, apologize, shrink. Then Dante's thumb moved once against her back, barely there, and somehow the tiny gesture steadied her more than any speech could have. Dante turned his head toward Julian with predatory calm. "You had a diamond, and treated her like dirt." The room seemed to hold its breath. Julian let out a sharp laugh. "That's poetic, but you don't know her." "I know enough," Dante replied. "I know you touched her hard enough to leave marks. I know 2 men followed her from the service corridor. I know your foundation moved donor funds through 3 shell companies before midnight tonight. And I know you are sweating through a $9,000 tuxedo because you do not know how much she told me." Julian went still. That was the first crack. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a flicker in his eyes, a small loss of blood beneath his skin. Mara saw it and felt something inside her shift. Dante had not defended her by calling her sweet or innocent. He had defended her by believing she had seen something real. Celeste's hand tightened around Julian's sleeve. This is absurd, she snapped, the sugar gone from her voice. Mara is a junior accountant with a victim complex. She probably made up some fantasy because she couldn't stand seeing Julian happy. Dante looked at Celeste as if she were an invoice he had already decided not to pay. Celeste Harrington, he murmured. Daughter of Richard Harrington. 3 failed hotels in Miami. 2 offshore loans. 1 very impatient creditor in Naples. Her face emptied. I don't know what you're talking about, no, Dante said. But your father does. He has until morning. The air dropped again, colder this time. Celeste stepped back without seeming to decide to. Mara watched the woman who had mocked her body minutes ago suddenly become small under the weight of her own secrets. The satisfaction should have felt sharp. Instead, it felt quiet, heavy, almost sad. Julian grabbed for control. Enough. This is a charity gala, not one of your backroom intimidation rituals. His voice rose too high, drawing the attention he had always known how to weaponize. If Mara has accusations, she can make them through proper legal channels. Proper legal channels, Dante repeated, and something close to amusement darkened his mouth. The same channels your father bought in Cook County. A councilman near the front turned pale and immediately pretended to study a sculpture. Julian saw it. So did Mara. Another crack. Dante leaned in, speaking so softly that only the first rows heard him clearly, but fear carried the rest. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Anyone who lies about her will answer to me. Anyone who tries to touch what belongs to her will learn the difference between an apology and a consequence. He smiled then without warmth. I prefer consequences. Mara should have felt relieved. Instead, the room tilted. Wife. Belongs. Consequences. The words wrapped around her like silken wire. She had asked him to pretend, and Dante had turned the pretense into armor. But armor was heavy, and she did not yet know the price. She glanced toward the service corridor and saw the scarred man from the freight elevator watching from behind a marble column. He did not approach. He only touched his collar and vanished. Mara's fingers flew to her pendant. Dante noticed instantly. What did you see? He murmured without turning his head. One of them, she whispered. Volkov's man. Near the East Hall. Dante's hand slid from her back to her waist, not possessive now but shielding, positioning his body between hers and the room. Good girl, he breathed, and the praise hit somewhere dangerously deep. Keep your eyes on me. Before Mara could answer, a bartender appeared beside her with a tray of untouched champagne. He was older than the others, gray at the temples with tired eyes that did not match the polished uniform. As Dante turned slightly to speak to one of his men, the bartender lowered the tray just enough for Mara to see a folded cocktail napkin beneath one flute. For the lady, he murmured. His accent was Chicago South Side, rough around the edges. Mara's pulse jumped. She took the glass with numb fingers and palmed the napkin. No one seemed to notice except Dante, whose eyes flicked once toward her hand but said nothing. When she opened the napkin against her skirt, 6 words stared back in blocky blue ink. Your father trusted Moretti. Don't run. Beneath the message was a symbol she had not seen since childhood, a tiny triangle inside a circle. The ballroom noise returned slowly, but it returned wrong. People spoke in careful tones now, eyes sliding toward Mara, and away again. Julian and Celeste retreated toward a cluster of family donors, their faces tight, their whispers urgent. Dante guided Mara toward the balcony doors without seeming to hurry. Do you recognize him? He asked, meaning the bartender. Mara shook her head, still staring at the napkin hidden in her fist. No, but I recognize the mark. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. My father used it in his notebooks. He told me if I ever saw it I should stop talking and start listening. Dante's expression changed almost imperceptibly. The cold mask remained, but something behind it sharpened into memory. Your father's name, Elias Ellison. Mara answered. Dante went completely still. Outside, the glass rain traced the city in silver lines. Inside, the music played on as if the past had not just opened its eyes. Dante led her through the balcony doors, and the cold night air slapped Mara awake. Below them, Chicago glittered wet and merciless, all black river and golden windows. The napkin trembled in her hand. You knew him, she said. It was not a question. Dante looked out over the city, his jaw carved from granite, his eyes reflecting nothing. For a moment, Mara thought he would lie. Men like him were built from secrets. Then he said, "Your father saved my sister's life." Mara forgot how to breathe. "That's impossible. Many true things are." He turned back to her. Elias Ellison disappeared with evidence that could have ended 3 families and half this city's respectable men. For 3 years I looked for what he protected. His gaze dropped to the silver coin at her throat. "I did not know he had protected it by giving it to you." The balcony door opened behind them. Julian stepped out alone, his charm-stripped thin panic showing through the seams. "Mara," he hissed, "you have no idea what you're doing. That man will use you and throw you away." She looked at him, then really looked, and saw not the man she once loved, but the coward beneath the cufflinks. "And you were going to do better," Julian's mouth tightened. "I was trying to keep you alive." Dante gave a soft, humorless laugh. Julian flinched before he could hide it. "Careful," Dante murmured. "The next lie should be better than the last." Julian's eyes darted to Mara's pendant. Too quick, too hungry. Mara saw it. Dante saw her seeing it. And in that silent exchange, the fake marriage became something more dangerous than protection. It became a hunt. Julian stepped closer. "Give me the necklace, Mara. You don't know what it is." For 1 second, the old Mara might have obeyed. The woman who wanted to be loved. The woman who made herself smaller at dinner tables and laughed at jokes that cut her open. But that woman had been humiliated in the ballroom and left behind somewhere between the shattered plate and Dante's open door. Mara closed her fist around the pendant. "No." The word was small, but it was hers. Dante's eyes moved to her face. And something darkly pleased flickered there. Julian's expression twisted. "You stupid." Dante moved 1 step forward. That was all. Julian stopped breathing. From inside the ballroom came the sudden crash of breaking glass, then a scream quickly swallowed by music. Dante's hand closed around Mara's. "They're done waiting," he said. "Stay beside me." And this time Mara did not ask as what. The scream inside the ballroom lasted less than 2 seconds before the string quartet lurched into a louder piece, too bright and too fast, the way expensive people covered ugly things with prettier noise. Dante pulled Mara away from the balcony rail, his hand wrapped around hers with an iron grip that somehow remained careful. Through the glass, she saw guests turning in startled clusters, champagne spilled across marble, a waiter kneeling beside a shattered tray, and 2 of Dante's men moving like shadows through the crowd. Julian had already vanished back inside. Of course he had. Mara's pendant felt suddenly hot against her chest, as if the little silver coin had become a living thing with a pulse. "What is happening?" she whispered. Dante's eyes swept the ballroom, predatory and precise. "Volkov is forcing the timeline." He angled his body in front of hers. "He wanted the necklace quietly. Now he wants it before I lock down the building." Mara almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lock down the building. There are police commissioners in there. Judges. Donors." Dante glanced at her. "Exactly." He opened the balcony door and guided her back into the heat and noise. The air smelled of broken champagne lilies, perfume, and fear hidden beneath money. Conversations sputtered out again as they entered, but this silence was different. Earlier the crowd had feared Dante. Now they feared what his presence meant. Something dangerous had slipped into their beautiful room, and nobody wanted to admit it had been invited by one of them. Dante spoke without raising his voice, and 3 men near the walls moved instantly. "No one leaves through the East Hall. Secure the service elevators. Find the bartender." Mara tightened her hand around the napkin hidden in her palm. "The bartender." Dante's expression hardened. "If he knew your father, he is either your ally or the bait." They crossed the ballroom toward a private corridor lined with black and white photographs of old Chicago. Mara saw herself reflected in the glass frames as they passed. Flushed cheeks, wild eyes, teal dress, wrinkled at the waist, soft curves outlined by silk that had suddenly stopped feeling like armor and started feeling like a target. Dante noticed the way she tugged at the fabric. "Do not do that," he murmured. "Do not make yourself smaller because animals are watching." The words hit too close. "You don't understand," she breathed. "They always watch. They watch what I eat, what I wear, how much room I take at tables, how men look at me when they think nobody important will claim me." Dante stopped so abruptly she nearly collided with him. He turned, dark eyes burning. "You are not fat. You are a goddess. You are lush and soft and perfect." They were insects mistaking a queen for prey. Before Mara could answer, one of Dante's men appeared from the corridor face tight. Boss, false alarm on the west stairwell. Someone pulled smoke sensors near the kitchens. Also, your brother's phone just pinged from the parking garage. Dante's jaw changed. Not fear. Something worse. Controlled fury. Mara felt it pass through him like an electrical current. Luca is in Boston, he said. The man swallowed. The ping is local. Dante looked toward the elevators, then toward Mara. In that fraction of hesitation, she understood Volkov's move. Split the shield from the target. Make Dante choose blood over a woman he had only claimed for a lie. She pulled her hand free before he could decide. Go, she said. Dante's eyes cut to her. No, if it's your brother, it is not. But if it is, that was the first time his silence frightened her more than his commands. Dante leaned close, his voice, a dangerous rumble meant only for her. Listen carefully. You do not leave this corridor. You do not follow anyone who is not me. You do not remove that necklace. If the lights go out, you get low and move toward the kitchen because the floor changes from marble to tile and tile carries sound. Mara stared at him. Her father had once told her the same thing in a motel outside Detroit when she was 13 and pretending not to cry. Tile carries sound. Dante pressed something small and black into her palm. A panic transmitter. Push it once if you are scared. Twice if you are taken. What happens if I push it 3 times? She asked. For the first time a grim smile touched his mouth. Then I burn the building down. He turned to his men. No one touches her. For 7 minutes nobody did. Mara stood inside the private corridor with 2 Moretti guards at either end while the gala convulsed beyond the archway. She could see fragments Celeste crying into her phone near the Champagne Tower, Julian arguing with a man twice his age, donors trying to leave, and being politely stopped by men who did not look polite at all. Mara tried to breathe. She tried to think like an accountant. Numbers first. Patterns first. Volkov wanted the necklace. Julian wanted it too. Dante knew her father. Her father had hidden something inside a pendant he had put around his daughter's neck the night before he died. The thought hurt so much she almost missed the smell. Bitter almond beneath the lilies, not strong. Not enough for the crowd. Just enough near her end of the corridor. Her head turned slowly toward the air vent above the service door. One of the Moretti guards coughed, then the other. Mara's heartbeat dropped into a cold, steady rhythm. Not panic. Recognition. Her father had taught her fear in categories. Loud fear wasted energy. Quiet fear saved your life. She pressed the transmitter once. The guard nearest her frowned. Mrs. Moretti. His voice slurred on the title. Then his knees buckled. Mara lunged forward, catching his shoulder, but he was too heavy and slid down the wall. The service door behind her opened without a sound. Scar under the ear stepped in wearing a hotel staff jacket, a black mask hanging loose beneath his chin. Smart girl, he murmured. But not smart enough. Mara stepped back. Her fingers closed around the transmitter. His gun lifted. Press it again, and I shoot them first. Behind him another man blocked the only clear exit. Mara did not scream. She let her face crumple, instead let her shoulders fold inward, the way men expected from women they had already decided were weak. Please, she whispered, backing toward the linen cart. I don't even know what it opens. Scar smiled. That is why you are still alive. He reached for her necklace. Mara's left hand trembled visibly. Her right hand slid behind her, touching folded napkins, polished silverware, a glass bottle of mineral water. The second man laughed. Volkov was worried about this one. Scar's fingers brushed her throat. That was when Mara moved, not elegantly, not like a movie assassin. She moved like a woman who knew her own weight, her own center, and the exact distance between a man's knee and the floor. She smashed the bottle against Scar's wrist, stepped inside his reach, and drove her shoulder into his chest with everything she had. Her size, so often treated like a flaw by rooms full of small, cruel people, became physics, mass, momentum, an unshakable center of gravity. Scar hit the linen cart and the cart slammed into the second man's legs. His gun fired once into the ceiling. The sound cracked through the corridor and vanished under the ballroom music. Mara grabbed the falling guard's radio from the floor and hurled it at the wall camera hard enough to shatter the casing but not the lens. She needed the feed damaged. Not dead. Damaged meant someone watching security would look twice. The second attacker lunged for her, but his shoes slipped on spilled mineral water. Mara caught his wrist with both hands, twisted the way her father had shown her in a church basement 20 years ago, and used the strap of her evening bag to cinch his arm against the door handle. Scar rose behind her with murder in his eyes. Mara ran not toward the ballroom where panic and bodies would slow her, but into the service passage he had opened. The passage smelled of bleach, old grease, and hot wiring. Her lungs screamed. Her dress tore at the thigh, freeing her knees. She counted turns. Left at the green exit sign, right where the floor dipped. 3 steps over the loose grate. She had memorized the hotel map while pretending to admire floral arrangements during setup. Behind her, Scar cursed in Russian. Mara's father had taught her only 5 Russian phrases, all of them useful and none of them polite. She heard necklace and garage and understood enough. They had cars waiting below. If they got her into one, Dante would find blood and tire marks. Nothing else. The freight elevator doors opened before she reached them. Julian stood inside. For one impossible second, relief almost tricked her. Then she saw the small black pistol in his shaking hand. "Get in, Mara." His tuxedo was damp with sweat, his perfect hair collapsing over his forehead. He looked less like a former lover now, and more like a boy who had stolen fire and realized it burned. Mara stopped 6 feet away. "You," she breathed. "You sent them. I tried to keep this clean," he snapped. "You think I wanted Volkov's men involved. You think I wanted Dante Moretti looking at my accounts." His eyes darted to the pendant. "Always the pendant. Never her face. Give it to me, and I can still fix this." Mara felt something final break inside her, not her heart. That had broken long ago. This was the leash. "You told me you loved me," she said. Julian flinched as if the words annoyed him more than any accusation. "I did love you, in private. Before you started digging into things you had no right to touch." Mara laughed, once quiet and raw. "No right. You hired me to audit the foundation. I hired you because your father's old contacts trusted your name," he bit out. "Because Volkov believed you knew where Elias hid the key. Because everyone underestimated you, Mara. Do you know how useful that made you?" There it was. The truth, ugly and clean. He had never been ashamed of her because she was too much. He had chosen her because others thought she was too little to matter. Mara's fingers slid to the pendant. "And then you got angry when I mattered anyway." Julian's face twisted. "Don't make me hurt you." Mara looked at his gun. His hand shook too badly. Safety off. Finger too tense. No discipline. She heard her father again. "Never stare at the weapon. Watch the wrist." Behind her, Scar entered the passage, breathing hard. Julian saw him and panicked. That was all Mara needed. She threw the silver pendant upward, not away, just high enough for both men's eyes to follow it. Julian jerked his gun toward the movement. Mara surged forward. All fury, and adrenaline slamming her shoulder into his stomach, and driving him backward into the elevator wall. The gun went off near her ear. Pain rang white through her skull. She grabbed his wrist, bit down hard enough to taste copper, and he screamed. Scar tackled her from behind before she could reach the pistol. The impact drove the breath from her body, but he made the mistake of assuming down meant beaten. Mara did not try to scramble away. She rolled toward him using the fullness she carried, forcing him off balance, tangling his arm beneath her. Her knee found his ribs, her elbow found his throat. Julian crawled for the pendant, sobbing curses. Mara stretched one hand, caught the chain first, and yanked it back against her chest. Then she pressed the transmitter twice. Scar saw the movement. His hand closed around her hair. Too late, he snarled. The freight elevator doors began to close, with all 3 of them half inside, half out. Mara jammed her heel into the track, screaming through her teeth as metal crushed the edge of her shoe. The lights went out. For one breath, the entire service corridor vanished into black. Then red emergency strips flickered along the floor, painting everything in blood-colored lines. Julian whimpered. Scar swore. Mara listened. Tile carried sound. 2 sets of running footsteps from the ballroom. One heavier than the other. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Dante. Scar heard it too, and dragged Mara upright, using her body as a shield, one forearm across her throat. "Stop," he shouted into the dark. "Or I cut her open." The footsteps stopped. Silence spread thick and lethal. Mara could not see Dante clearly. Only the outline of broad shoulders and the pale flash of his shirt cuff. His voice came low through the emergency-lit corridor. "You have 3 seconds to remove your hands from my wife." Scar laughed, but Mara felt his arm tremble. "Volkov wants the key." "Volkov wants many things he will not live to enjoy," Dante replied. Julian, crouched near the elevator floor, made a broken sound. "Dante, please, I can explain." Dante did not even look at him. His eyes were on Mara's face. Not the knife near her throat. Not the blood at her lip. Her face. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Mara breathed against Scar's arm. "They interrupted my reading." For one stunned second, even Scar seemed confused. Then Dante smiled. It was not kind. It was not human. It was the expression of a man who had just fallen in love with the worst possible moment of a woman's courage. Mara shifted her weight half an inch, pressing her heel into Scar's instep. His grip loosened. Dante moved. It happened so fast Mara understood it only in pieces. A shadow crossing red light. A sharp crack. Scar's arm disappearing from her throat. Dante catching her before she hit the floor. One of Dante's men driving Julian face first into the elevator wall. The knife skittering across tile. Scar tried to rise and Dante's shoe pressed down on his wrist with horrible calm. "No," Dante said softly. "You had your turn." Mara clung to his sleeve, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. He cupped the back of her head with one hand, shielding her from the sight as his men handled what came next. "Look at me," he ordered. She did. His obsidian eyes searched hers, and for the first time since she had entered his lounge, his control looked cracked around the edges. "You fought them," he murmured. "You survived them." Mara swallowed. "I had to." His thumb brushed blood from her mouth. "No, Mara. You chose to." They brought her into a small security office behind the kitchens, where monitors flickered with black and white feeds of the hotel. Dante wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. It smelled like cedarwood smoke in him, and she hated how much comfort she took from it. Outside the office, Julian was held between 2 men, pale and shaking, one wrist swelling where she had bitten him. Scar lay zip-tied on the floor, groaning through broken pride. Mara sat in a chair, her torn dress exposing one scraped knee, her pendant clenched in both hands. Dante crouched in front of her, lowering himself until the most feared man in Chicago looked up at her like she was the only person in the room. "May I?" he asked, nodding at the necklace. The question itself startled her. Julian had demanded. "Volkov had hunted," Dante asked. Mara opened her fingers. Dante did not take the pendant from her neck. He only turned the coin gently, finding a seam so fine she had never noticed it. From his pocket he removed a slim black blade and pressed it into the edge. The coin clicked open. Mara stopped breathing. Inside, beneath the silver face, was a micro-etched strip no wider than a fingernail, covered in numbers too small to read. Dante's expression went utterly still. One of his men whispered a curse. Mara leaned closer, and the pattern struck her memory like lightning. "It's not a storage key," she said. Dante looked at her. "What?" "It's a cipher seed. My father used grids like this when he wanted a file to be useless without a living memory." Her voice shook, but her mind sharpened. "Numbers first. Patterns first. The necklace doesn't open the evidence." She looked through the glass at Julian. "I do." Dante followed her gaze and something dark passed over his face. "Then every man who wants that evidence needs you breathing." Mara laughed softly, bitterly. "Comforting. It should be." He stood and turned toward Julian, who recoiled before Dante spoke. "Your accounts are frozen." Julian blinked. "What?" "Your father's foundation. Your personal trusts. The shell companies you thought were hidden behind dead directors in Delaware. Frozen." Dante adjusted one cuff, calm as winter. "Your law firm has received the first packet. The second goes to every donor in that ballroom if Mara tells me to send it. The third goes somewhere no one can buy back." Julian's knees almost gave. "First layer," Mara thought distantly. "Money." Dante glanced toward Celeste on one monitor, crying as security stopped her near the lobby. "And Miss Harrington's family has just learned what her signature purchased." Mara watched the monitors as the world that had mocked her began to fracture. Celeste's father appeared on screen, red-faced, refusing to look at his daughter as 2 attorneys surrounded him. Julian's mother stood in the ballroom with one hand over her mouth, not from concern but from calculation. Donors checked their phones and turned away from the Vale family one by one. Professional death delivered by vibration and whispered alerts. Dante looked at Mara. This is not over. Volkov will come harder now. She touched the opened pendant. Then we open the file first. You are injured. I am angry. His eyes darkened with something like approval. Good. Mara rose his jacket hanging over her beautifully plus-size figure like a battle flag stolen from a king. For the first time that night, she did not ask where to hide. She asked, "Where's the computer?" The security office computer was old enough to complain when Mara touched the keyboard, its fan grinding beneath the desk like a trapped insect. Around her, Dante's men moved with controlled violence, locking doors, muting alarms, dragging truth out of phones, radios, and terrified staff. But at the center of the chaos, Mara went very still. Her scraped knee throbbed. Her lips stung where Julian's gun had clipped the air too close to her face. Dante's jacket weighed over her shoulders like a dark promise. Yet the moment the first encrypted drive opened on the monitor, pane folded itself away. Numbers filled the screen in narrow columns. Dates, transfers, shell accounts, donor codes, false invoices, 1,000 tiny lies dressed as respectable finance. Mara leaned closer, silver coin open beside the keyboard, and whispered, "Dad, what did you hide?" Dante stood behind her, not touching, but close enough that she felt his presence like a wall at her back. The cipher did not open like a normal password. Her father had hated normal things. He had trusted patterns, memory, and the human mind more than machines. Mara stared at the micro-etched numbers inside the pendant and felt herself falling backward through time, a motel room outside Detroit rain against a cracked window, her father drawing grids on napkins while she ate cold fries from a filet paper bag. Numbers lie when frightened men write them, Elias Ellison had told her, but patterns confess. Back then, Mara thought it was a game. He would give her rows of numbers and ask her to find the one that did not belong. She always could. Now, years later, with Volkov hunting her and Julian bleeding in the hallway, she saw the trick. Every ninth digit in the pendant sequence was not part of the key. It was a direction. Up, down, left, right, a map hidden inside math. Dante watched her work without speaking. That silence gave her room. Julian had always filled silence with correction. Celeste with mockery, boardrooms with doubt. Dante let the silence serve her. Mara entered the first sequence, then the second, then paused at the third. Her hand shook. Not from fear this time. From recognition. "This is my birthday," she murmured. Dante's eyes sharpened. The code. Part of it. But not the date. The intervals between the numbers. She swallowed hard. "He built me into the lock." The screen flashed once. Then black. For one terrible second, Mara thought she had failed. Then a folder appeared with a single title. Ellison Final Trust. Beneath it were 4 subfolders. Vale Harrington, Volkov Moretti. Dante's jaw tightened when he saw his family name. Mara turned slowly. Did you know his expression did not soften? No. The answer was immediate. Dangerous. Honest. Before Mara could open the first folder, the office door slammed inward. Julian was shoved inside by one of Dante's men, hands-bound tuxedo, torn eyes wild from terror and humiliation. "Stop," he gasped. "Mara, listen to me. You cannot open that in front of him." Dante did not move. Interesting advice from a man who tried to put her in an elevator with a gun. Julian ignored him, desperation making him stupid. "Your father was not a hero. He worked with all of them. He worked with Moretti. He worked with Volkov. He worked with my father." Mara's fingers hovered above the mouse. Julian saw doubt flicker and lunged at it like a starving thing. "That's why he died. He stole from dangerous men and hid behind you. You think that pendant was love. It was a burden. He made you a target." The room seemed to tilt, but Mara forced herself to breathe. Her father had taught her that too. Dante finally stepped forward and Julian flinched so hard the chair behind him scraped the floor. "Careful," Dante murmured. "You are confusing truth with usefulness." Julian laughed shakily. "You want truth? Ask him why his family name is in the file. Ask him why your father trusted a criminal more than his own daughter." Mara turned to Dante. "Answer him." The room went cold. Dante's men went very still as if no one had ever spoken to him that way and remained standing. Dante's eyes held hers. My sister Sophia was kidnapped 3 years ago by men wearing Volkov colors and police badges. Your father found the payment route. He gave me 40 minutes of warning. I got her out alive. His voice dropped. 2 days later, Elias Ellison was dead. Mara's throat closed. Why didn't you find me? Something painful moved behind Dante's obsidian eyes. I tried. Someone buried your trail. Julian's face changed, just a flicker, but Mara saw it. So did Dante. The old Mara might have missed it because pain had always pulled her eyes down. Not now. You, she breathed. Julian shook his head too quickly. No. Mara stood so fast the chair hit the wall behind her. You buried my trail. You found me first. Julian's mouth opened. Closed. Dante's hand landed on the back of Julian's chair, with a softness more terrifying than rage. Explain. Julian looked from Dante to Mara. Then, to the screen calculating which lie might keep him alive longest. My father was contacted after Elias died, he said finally. We were told the daughter might have the key. We were told to watch her. That's all it was at first. Mara felt cold spread through her chest. You dated me because of this. Julian's silence answered before his mouth could. The truth should have shattered her. Instead, it clarified everything. The first dinner where Julian asked too many questions about her father. The sudden job offer at the firm. The way he encouraged her to keep wearing the pendant because it was sentimental. The little comments that made her feel lucky. He tolerated her body, her hunger, her laugh, her presence. He had not simply failed to love her. He had studied her, used her, and called it affection when it served him. Mara looked at him and felt grief pass through her like weather through an open window. It hurt. Then it moved on. You made me think I was hard to love, she said quietly. Julian's eyes reddened. I was trying to survive. Mara nodded once. So was I. She turned back to the computer. Dante, bring them all to the ballroom. Dante's gaze burned into the side of her face. All the donors, the Vales, Celeste, the bartender, anyone who laughed, anyone who lied, anyone who paid. Mara lifted her chin, the torn teal dress visible beneath Dante's jacket, her curves no longer hidden or apologized for. If they wanted a public story, they can have a public ending. Something like fierce pride moved across Dante's face. He leaned close enough that only she heard him. There she is. The words warmed her more than they should have. Then he turned, and the warmth vanished from the room. Move everyone, he ordered. Phones on. Cameras live. No one exits until Mrs. Moretti finishes speaking. Julian began to protest, but Dante looked down at him and smiled. You wanted legal channels. Consider this discovery. The ballroom was no longer pretending to be a gala. The auction lights still glowed. The flowers still stood in grand white arrangements. The champagne still bubbled in untouched glasses. But the illusion had collapsed. Guests clustered in frightened pockets, while Dante's men guarded every exit with quiet efficiency. At the front of the room, where a painting had been removed from its display stand, a projector screen now showed the login page of the Ellison file. Mara walked in beside Dante, and the crowd parted again. This time she felt every inch of herself. The fullness she carried, the ache in her shoulder, the scrape on her knee, the pendant against her chest. She did not glide like Celeste. She did not float like the wives who had looked through her. She walked like a woman of glorious substance who had survived being hunted through the walls of their beautiful party. Celeste stood near the front with mascara beneath her eyes, her father refusing to touch her arm, when she saw Mara, rage cut through the fear. This is insane, she snapped. She is hijacking a charity event because she couldn't handle rejection. A few people looked relieved to hear a familiar lie. Mara almost smiled. Celeste was still playing the old game, hoping the room would prefer a thin, pretty falsehood to a heavy truth. Dante started to move, but Mara lifted one hand. He stopped instantly. The room noticed. So did Celeste. And the sight frightened her more than Dante's anger. Mara looked at the woman who had mocked the space she occupied. A real man doesn't need to borrow another woman's cruelty to insult someone, she said. Her voice trembled, then steadied. And a real woman doesn't have to destroy another one to feel chosen. The words landed harder than Mara expected. Celeste's face twisted. Julian, dragged to the front by two guards, stared at the floor. Mara connected the computer to the projector. The first folder opened Harrington. Bank transfers filled the screen. Payments from a Volkov-controlled company to Celeste Harrington marked as consulting fees. Then message screenshots appeared, time-stamped, precise, undeniable. Celeste asking for Mara's access badge to be copied. Celeste sending Julian a photo of Mara's workstation. Celeste writing, "Make her look unstable first. No one believes women like her when they cry." A sound moved through the crowd, not quite a gasp, not quite a groan. Celeste shook her head violently. "Those are fake." Mara clicked the next file. Audio filled the ballroom, Celeste's own voice bright and bored. "By midnight she'll either be arrested or gone. Either way, Julian is free." Celeste's father stepped away from her as if scandal were contagious. That was the third layer of collapse, and it was crueler than shouting. She reached for him. "Daddy, please." He did not look at her. "You signed with them," he whispered. "Do you know what you've done to us?" Celeste's mouth crumpled. The socialite who had sliced Mara open with a smile now stood stripped of audience money and protection. Mara felt no triumph, only a distant clean pity. She opened the next folder, Veil. The screen filled with forged access logs bearing Mara's employee ID, then back-end records showing Julian's own administrator override creating them. Donor money moved into private accounts. Emails from Julian to Volkov's intermediary. A video still appeared next Julian in a parking garage accepting a black envelope from Scar under the ear. In the ballroom, Julian made a low broken sound. His mother stepped forward, diamonds shaking at her throat. "Julian," she whispered, "tell me this is not real." Julian looked at her then, and Mara saw the child beneath the predator, desperate for rescue from the family that had built him. "I was fixing father's mistake," he said. The room turned toward Arthur Vale, Julian's father, who had stood silent until that moment near the donor wall. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Smaller. Dante's men moved subtly closer. Mara clicked the next file. Arthur Vale Judicial Roots. Names appeared. Judges. Commissioners. Police contacts. Paid favors disguised as campaign donations. The respectable heart of the gala began to rot in public. Men who had mocked Mara with their silence now trembled behind their wives. One judge set down his champagne with such care it was almost funny. Then the bartender walked forward. The older man with gray temples and tired eyes removed his bow tie and placed it on a table as if removing a costume. Dante's men let him pass. Mara's hand tightened around the mouse. "Who are you?" she asked. The man looked at her with grief so old it had become part of his face. "Samuel Rusk. I worked financial crimes with your father before the task force was buried." He took a small leather notebook from inside his vest. Its edges were cracked, the cover stained. Mara recognized it before he opened it, her father's handwriting. Her knees almost failed. Dante's hand hovered near her back and a touching unless she needed him. Samuel's voice softened. Elias knew they would erase every digital copy. So he made 2 human locks. You were one. I was the other. Mara's eyes burned. "Why didn't you come for me?" Samuel swallowed. "Because Julian Vale got there first." The notebook held the final instructions. Not evidence, context. Elias had written names, dates, fears, and one sentence that made Mara cover her mouth. "If Mara is reading this, tell her I did not leave her the key because I wanted her in danger. I left it because she was the only person I trusted to know when to use it." Tears blurred the screen, the room Dante's dark shape beside her. For years, she had thought her father left her nothing but grief and a strange coin. Now she understood he had left her a choice. Samuel placed a small drive beside the laptop. "This is the witness seal. Your father recorded his statement before he died. Once opened with your cipher, it copies automatically to federal servers and 3 newspapers." The crowd seemed to breathe in as one body. Arthur Vale lunged forward. Dante's men caught him before Mara even flinched. Mara inserted the drive. The projector went black, then her father's face appeared grainy and tired beneath fluorescent light. The sound quality was poor, but his voice filled the ballroom with impossible life. He spoke of Volkov laundering money through charity foundations, of Arthur Vale purchasing legal protection, of the Harrington debt. Of Moretti not as saint or savior, but as the only criminal in the network who had refused to sell children judges or witnesses. Dante's face hardened as every eye flicked toward him. Elias continued, "If my daughter is present when this file opens, then the men I feared have found her. Believe her, protect her. And Mara, sweetheart, if you hear this, remember what I taught you. You were never too much. You were the only thing strong enough to carry the truth." Mara broke then, but she did not look away. When the video ended, silence owned the ballroom. Not Dante, not money, not fear, truth. Then phones began buzzing, one after another. Donors looked down and went pale. News alerts, automatic uploads, legal packets, federal warrants moving through servers no one in that room could bribe fast enough. Arthur Vale sank into a chair. Julian stared at Mara as if she had become something supernatural. Celeste sobbed quietly, abandoned in silver silk. Samuel Rusk closed Elias's notebook and stepped back. Dante leaned toward Mara. "Your call," he murmured. She understood what he meant. The files could go wider, faster, crueler. She looked at Julian, who had once made her apologize for ordering dessert in public. She looked at Celeste, who had laughed at the shape of her body. She looked at the guests who had watched and done nothing. "Send everything Mara said." Dante smiled, and this time, there was something almost reverent in it. He nodded once. Across the room his men moved. Laptops opened. Calls went out. Screens lit up. The Vale Empire, the Harrington name, and Volkov's Chicago pipeline began to burn in clean digital fire. But Volkov himself was not in the room, and Mara knew enough now to understand that public truth could wound a monster without killing it. Dante knew it too. His phone vibrated. He read the message, and his eyes became fathomless. Volkov's convoy just turned toward the river. Running, Mara asked. "No," Dante said. "Coming." A tremor moved through the room as if everyone had heard death knock on the hotel doors. Mara touched the open pendant at her throat, then looked at Dante. "Then we finish this before he arrives." Dante's voice dropped into a dark promise. Together. Volkov did not enter the Blackstone Hotel like a fugitive. He entered like a man who had bought enough policemen, judges, and prayers to believe doors no longer applied to him. The front lobby cameras caught him. First tall, silver-haired, wrapped in a black coat wet from the rain, 6 men behind him, moving with the brutal discipline of wolves. In the ballroom, the live feed appeared on the projector screen, and a sound of terror passed through Chicago's elite. These people had applauded themselves all night for donating money they had already stolen. Now the monster they funded was walking across marble toward them. Mara stood beside Dante, still in her torn teal dress. Still wearing his jacket, still tasting blood where her lip had split. Yet the fear inside her had changed. It no longer told her to hide. It told her where to stand. Dante's men moved toward the doors, but Mara touched his sleeve. "Wait." His eyes cut to her, dark and fathomless. "He came because he thinks the upload can still be stopped." She looked at the projector, then at the files, copying across 3 mirrored servers. Let him believe that for 30 more seconds. Dante studied her face, and something like admiration warmed the deadly calm of his expression. "You have a plan." Mara almost smiled. "I have accounting." She stepped to the microphone at the front of the ballroom. The guests stared as if the woman they had mocked had grown taller without moving. "Mr. Volkov," she said, her voice carrying through the speakers and into the lobby, "feed the file you want is open. If I disappear tonight, every remaining record goes public with your name at the top." On screen, Volkov stopped. Not because he was afraid, because he was intelligent enough to recognize a door closing. He looked up toward the camera, smiled thinly, and spoke into his phone. A second later, Dante's phone rang. Dante answered without greeting. The whole ballroom listened to half a conversation sharpened into silence. "You have something of mine," Volkov said through the speaker. "No," Dante replied. "I have someone you failed to kill." Volkov's voice remained smooth. "The woman is a bookkeeper with an inflated sense of value." Mara took the phone from Dante before he could answer. Gasps scattered through the room. Dante let her. "A lamb might get slaughtered," Mara said, looking directly at the lobby camera, "but a whale can sink the whole damn ship." Volkov's smile disappeared. Dante's slowly, dangerously appeared. That was the moment Volkov's empire began eating itself. Samuel Rusk stepped forward with a second phone connected to the federal task force her father had once served. Dante's people released the final packet not to gossip pages or frighten donors, but to the accounts Volkov's own lieutenants used to track payment. Names, routes, betrayals. Proof that Volkov had skimmed from his own partners, while feeding them forged ledgers through the Veil Foundation. In the lobby feed, one of Volkov's men checked his phone. Then another. Their formation loosened by inches. Trust Mara knew was just another balance sheet. Once the numbers failed, the whole structure collapsed. Volkov turned, barking in order, but the men behind him did not move quickly enough. Dante leaned close to Mara's ear, his voice a low, lethal purr. You just made him poor in a room full of killers. Volkov still tried to reach the ballroom. Men like him did not know how to retreat until the floor vanished beneath them. But before he reached the grand staircase, police lights washed blue and red across the lobby windows. Not the officers Arthur Vale had purchased. Federal agents. Samuel's people. Elias Ellison's final revenge, arriving 3 years late but right on time. Volkov looked toward the revolving doors, then toward the elevators, and for the first time that night, the great predator found no open path. Dante's men did not touch him. They did not need to. His own men backed away first. That was the fourth layer of collapse, not money, not reputation, not comfort, but physical safety. The moment a tyrant realizes fear was rented, not owned. On screen, Volkov's face hardened into something ugly and human, as Julian watched the feed from his knees near the donor table, his face gray, his perfect life reduced to sweat and shaking hands. When Volkov was taken, Julian made a sound Mara had never heard from him before. Relief maybe, or grief for himself. He crawled 2 steps before Dante's men stopped him. Mara, he choked. Please, you have to tell them I cooperated. Tell them I helped you open it. Tell them I didn't know Volkov would kill you. Mara looked down at him and remembered every small death he had given her, the laugh. When she ordered dessert, the hand pulled away in public, the word ambitious, spoken like a stain, the lie that she was lucky to be wanted at all. Once, she had imagined him begging for her love. Now that he was begging for his freedom, she felt absolutely nothing but pity. No, she said. Julian's face crumpled. Mara, please. I loved you. She shook her head, and the movement felt like closing a door in a house she no longer lived in. You loved that I was useful. You loved that I doubted myself. You loved that I apologized when you were cruel. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. But you never loved me. He reached toward the hem of Dante's jacket around her shoulders. Dante's hand moved once, and Julian froze. Mara stepped back on her own. Do not touch me again. Celeste, abandoned near the front row, began sobbing harder when 2 agents approached her. Her father did not save her. Arthur Vale did not save his son. All the people who had built their lives on silence discovered silence could also be a prison. By dawn, the Blackstone Hotel had emptied of music and lies. Statements were taken. Laptops were seized. Donors hid their faces from cameras outside. Celeste was escorted through a side entrance without diamonds, without her father, without the silver glow of social power that had made her cruelty feel safe. Julian left in handcuffs, turning once at the door, as if Mara might still rescue him from the consequences he had mistaken for drama. She did not move. Dante stood beside her. His presence solid as iron beneath bespoke fabric, but he did not speak for her. That mattered more than she expected. He had protected her when death came. He had punished men who deserved it. But in the final moment, he let her silence be her own answer. When Julian vanished, Mara touched the pendant and whispered, "It's over." Samuel Rusk, standing nearby with her father's notebook, gently corrected her. "No, it's yours now." Dante took Mara from the hotel, not through the front where cameras waited, but through a private passage that opened onto a rain-dark alley, smelling of wet stone and morning bread from a bakery nearby. His car waited at the curb, black and silent. Mara expected him to issue another command. Instead, he opened the door and waited. The choice sat between them, fragile and enormous. "Where would you like to go?" he asked. Mara looked at the city waking beneath a pale gray sky. For years, she had wanted to go back to, before Julian, before doubt, before her father's death made every memory hurt. Now she understood there was no back. There was only forward, and the woman stepping into it had blood on her lip, torn silk at her thigh, and the key to half of Chicago's sins around her neck. "Somewhere I can breathe," she said. He took her to his penthouse above the river, where the windows rose from floor to ceiling, and the city looked almost gentle from that height. Mara showered in a marble bathroom bigger than her first apartment, washing away smoke, blood, and the perfume of people who had hated her for surviving. When she came out wrapped in a robe, there was a box waiting on the bed. Deep crimson silk lay folded inside, rich as a secret, with a note written in Dante's sharp black handwriting. "A queen should never wear colors meant to blend in. Wear this tonight. My driver will collect you at 8. Mara read it twice, then laughed softly despite herself. It was arrogant. Impossible. Entirely him. But underneath the command was recognition. He was not asking her to hide behind him. He was inviting her to be seen. That night she wore the crimson dress. It did not conceal her generous figure or apologize for the magnificent slope of her hips. It celebrated everything Julian had tried to shame. When Mara stepped into Dante's private dining room, conversation stopped among the few trusted people present, but this silence did not bruise. It honored. Dante stood at the head of a long table, set with black truffle, risotto seared steak figs glazed with honey-warm bread, and red wine dark enough to look like velvet in a glass. For a moment he simply looked at her. Not like a prize, not like property. Like a man seeing a storm choose its own shape. Beautiful, he said, and the word was not decoration. It was surrender, disguised as fact. Mara felt heat climb her throat. You say that like you're making a threat. Dante's mouth curved. To everyone who ever called you less, I am. They ate as the river carried city lights below them. Dante asked about her father and Mara told him about motel rooms, number games, cheap fries, and the way Elias used to hum when he was afraid, but trying not to show it. Dante listened. Truly listened. Dante listened. He did not interrupt when her voice broke. He did not fill the silence with money or promises. He only poured her water, passed her bread, and let grief move through the room without trying to dominate it. Later, Samuel arrived with legal papers transferring Elias's recovered trust into Mara's name, along with an offer from the federal task force to consult on the remaining financial cases. Dante added one more file, a proposal for Mara to oversee the clean financial restructuring of Moretti-controlled businesses that wanted legitimacy more than blood. Not as decoration, he said. Not as my protected little secret. As the woman who can see rot before it spreads. Mara looked at the contract, then at him. You trust me with your empire. Dante leaned back, eyes dark with predatory calm, and something far more dangerous. Hope. I trust you more than men who fear me. She laughed quietly. That may be the strangest compliment I've ever received. I can improve it. He stood and came around the table, stopping close enough for her to feel the warmth of him, far enough that she could still choose distance. Are you afraid of me? He asked. The question echoed through everything, the lounge, the ballroom, the gunshot, the files, the dawn. Mara thought of the first time she had seen him and mistaken danger for death. Now she understood danger could also be shelter if it knelt before choice. She lifted her chin. No. Dante's hand rose slowly, giving her time to refuse, and brushed one curl back from her face. His large calloused hand was warm despite his coldness, gentle against the bruise near her temple. Good, he murmured. Because I am terrifying when someone threatens what I worship. Mara's breath caught. Dante. His name sounded different now. Not a warning. Not a last resort whispered in a dark room. A beginning. He lowered his forehead to hers. You are my queen. From this night forward. Anyone who makes you feel less will face the fire. But you will never have to ask permission to stand beside me. You will stand because you choose to. The words moved through her like dawn breaking over a locked city. Mara had asked him to pretend to be her husband so she could survive the night. Now he was offering something far more frightening than protection, a place where she would never have to shrink again. Their first kiss was not soft, but it was careful, a promise with teeth, a vow made in the language of smoke, silk blood, and second chances. Dante kissed her like he remembered every moment she had been mocked and intended to erase none of it, only to prove it had never made her unworthy. Mara kissed him back as the woman her father had trusted the woman Julian had underestimated the woman Volkov had failed to kill. The woman who had walked into a ballroom, marked for death, and walked out wearing crimson. Outside, Chicago glittered beneath the last hour before sunrise. By midnight, they had planned to make her disappear. By morning, every person who laughed at her knew her name. And the woman they hunted through the dark did not survive by becoming smaller. She survived by becoming queen. Did you love seeing Mara rise as the curvy accountant who brought an empire to its knees and became the Mafia king's queen? Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more. Drop a comment below, telling us would you have trusted Dante Moretti that night or would you have run?